Good evening, dear friends, from every corner of the world. Welcome to Dreamize Story. Tonight we're slipping quietly beneath a sky dusted with stars, where stories have been etched in constellations for thousands of years. The air is still, with just the faintest rustle in the trees, as if the world itself is holding its breath to listen. Somewhere above your head, maybe just over Orion's belt, maybe to the left of your favourite airplane-shaped star, you'll find a scattering of lights arranged like the stretch of a reclining beast. A lion, but not just any lion. The kind of lion whose story begins with impossible strength, a cave full of echoes, and a demigod with no plan whatsoever. Now, before you settle too deep into your blanket fort or sink too far into your pillow nest, here's your usual ancient world disclaimer. You probably wouldn't survive this story in real time. You'd trip over your own sandal laces before the first roar. But since we're just here to listen, maybe sip something warm and avoid responsibility, we'll be fine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your stroll under a Grecian sky. It's summer, dry, still, and starlit. You walk through wheat fields just beginning to turn golden, the stalks whispering at your sides. A shepherd's fire flickers far in the distance, and the hills roll gently like sleeping giants. Above you, the heavens stretch wide and velvet black, with stars shimmering in their ancient patterns. The moon is thin tonight, more of a suggestion than a spotlight. You tilt your head and catch sight of it, the Leo constellation, bright and bold, with its arc of stars forming what might be a sickle or a lion's mane, depending on your mood and how well you've slept. It doesn't roar, but it radiates something proud and untamed. And you can't help but wonder, how did this line get up there in the first place? Ancient people loved to name stars after animals, their gods, and household objects, sometimes all three. But Leo was different. Its stars were charted by Babylonians, Greeks, Persians, and Egyptians alike. It showed up on old maps, like a celebrity cameo, always looming just above the horizon during the hottest months of the year. Historians still argue whether this is because lions were once more common in the Mediterranean, or because people just like putting large cats into sky stories. Either way, Leo became more than a symbol. It became a throne in the stars. You imagine yourself as one of those early astronomers, someone in a linen tunic with a clay tablet in hand, muttering things like, "Yes, definitely looks like a lion," while squinting at bright dots from a rooftop. No telescope, no GPS, just imagination and a decent sense of animal shapes. And that shape, Leo's arc, has stayed with us. The front paw, the chest, the flick of a tail in starlight. But unlike constellations named for humans, Orion, Andromeda, Leo isn't a person frozen in the sky. He's a beast, majestic, untamed, and, if stories are to be believed, nearly impossible to defeat. In the old Greek tales, the lion of the constellation wasn't just a generic feline. It was the lion, the one from Nemea, a creature so fierce, so impossibly strong, that even arrows bounced off its hide. No one could slay it. People whispered its name like a warning, avoided the rocky hills where it prowled, and made absolutely zero eye contact if they saw a paw print bigger than a helmet. You picture it now. Golden fur glinting in sunlight, breath like furnace heat, claws like bronze sickles, and eyes that don't blink. It didn't roar to scare, it roared to announce, "I'm here, you're not." Most lions avoid humans. This one didn't. It liked the chase. According to the old stories, it lived near the town of Nemea, hiding in caves by day and hunting by night. Livestock vanished, travelers disappeared, and eventually someone had to do something about it. That someone would turn out to be Heracles, muscle-bound, slightly unhinged, and famously bad at asking for help. But for now, you're still lying in a field under the stars, staring up at Leo. The sky feels ancient, stretched like parchment, and the line above you glows with the soft pride of myth. You trace the stars with your fingertip, Regulus, Denebula, Algeba, and think, this lion didn't just get there, he earned it. You sit up just slightly in the tall grass, still watching Leo's shape stretch across the sky. But now the stars begin to ripple, shimmer, and slowly rearrange themselves. Not vanishing, just transforming. You're no longer under the calm stars of a summer night, but standing at the edge of a rocky valley. The land is harsh here, craggy cliffs, sparse trees, everything in shades of dust and sunburnt brown. The grass is dry, the wind sharp, and the silence watchful. Something lives here. And the villagers of Nemea? They know it. The Nemean Lion isn't introduced with a dramatic entrance. There's no thunderclap or magical fog machine. Instead, there's a trail of shredded shields, abandoned helmets, a silence too quiet. Even the birds give this place a wide berth. You glance up into the cliffs and catch a glimpse, just a flick of movement, something large, gold-toned, too graceful for its size. This lion isn't just big, it's wrong big, bigger than the average cow, big enough that if it sat down, it would block the sun like a temple wall. And it doesn't purr, it hums, a low vibration in the stone itself. Local stories swirl like dust. This lion came from the gods or from Gaia herself. Some versions say it was born of Typhon and Echidna, those chaotic creatures responsible for a whole resume of mythical beasts. Others claim it was raised by the moon goddess Selene in a cave of silver light, then sent down as a test or a curse, depending on your mood. Historians still argue whether the lion was a metaphor for nature's rage, divine punishment, or just a great excuse for a hero to show off. Personally, you suspect it's a little of everything. No matter the version, everyone agrees on two things. It was invulnerable, and it didn't negotiate. Its fur was impenetrable. Arrows? They snapped. Spears? Bent like reeds. Swords? Might as well be spoons. The lion could not be killed, or at least no one had figured out how. The people of Nemea stopped trying and started avoiding. Trade routes shifted, pilgrimages detoured. Farmers just left whole pastures to the beast and hoped it wouldn't follow them home. And the lion? It didn't care about kingdoms or politics or divine drama. It wasn't collecting tribute or guarding a sacred artifact. It was just there, a force. Not evil, not heroic, just raw, clawed, golden existence. You find yourself standing on a hill at dusk. The lion moves below, silent, deliberate. You watch it drink from a stone basin, then shake its mane like a thundercloud. There's no malice in it, no theatrical growling, just a creature that belongs too much to this world, and maybe a little too much to another. Oddly, the Nemean lion doesn't even kill for food, at least not always. Sometimes it just tests its power, knocks down walls to see if they fall, leaps across ravines for the thrill of it. And when it yawns, it sounds like boulders cracking in half. You step closer to the cave it calls home. The entrance is tall, wide, ringed in claw marks that run like murals across the rock. Inside, there's no treasure, just shadows and bones. But the bones are old, ancient, even by mythological standards. Some scholars believe the lion has always been here, that it's not a single creature at all, but a role passed down, one lion replacing another, like a myth wearing a new face. You stand at the edge of the cave, dust coating your sandals, the wind pressing gently against your back, and deep inside, you hear it shift, a sound like dry leaves being crushed or an enormous breath being drawn. The Nemean Lion knows you're there, but it doesn't charge, not yet. Instead, you get the feeling it's waiting for something, someone, the right challenge. Because as powerful as it is, every story needs a counterbalance, a trial, a lesson. And this one? This tale of muscle versus myth, of brute force versus immortal hide, it's about to get its hero. Sort of. You take a step back from the cave. The stars shimmer again. And just over the horizon, you see someone trudging up the hill. A man carrying no map, no helpful guidebook, and very few brain cells when it comes to personal safety. His name is Heracles, and this lion has no idea what kind of stubborn is headed its way. Heracles, yes, with a K. That's the older Greek spelling before the Romans gave him a branding makeover. You spot him now, walking straight up the dusty trail toward Nemea, like a man who's lost the address of his doom, but knows the neighborhood. He's massive, not just tall, but dense, like a statue of a man who challenged a mountain to an arm wrestle and won. His tunic is simple, already stained. His sandals are worn. Over one shoulder, a club the size of a fence post. On the other, a very confused goat tied to a rope, for lunch probably, possibly a travel companion. With Heracles, it's hard to tell. But what's even more noticeable than the muscles or the weapon is his mood. He's grumpy, not angry, not heroic, just deeply, profoundly over it. And to be fair, it's been a long week. You see, Heracles is on assignment, divine probation, really, thanks to a complicated mess involving Hera's curse, a few murders, and some very questionable decisions at a dinner party. Our hero has been given a list. 12 labours, handed down by King Eurystheus. Think of it like a cosmic community service program, except instead of picking up trash by the highway, you wrestle death-immune wildlife and clean stables with rivers. And this lion, it's the very first labour. He's not here for glory. He's here for a check mark on a list. You follow him from a respectful distance as he approaches the mouth of the cave. He pauses, sets down his club, takes a bite from a dried fig, looks up at the clawed over stone like it's a mildly confusing doorbell. No prayers, no calling out to the gods, just a long sigh, and in he goes. Now, here's where the story gets fuzzy. Different versions, different vibes. In one telling, Heracles tries the normal stuff, shooting arrows, jabbing with a spear, shouting insults. None of it works. The lion treats him like a breeze. In another, Heracles traps the beast in the cave, blocks the entrance with stones, and decides, fine, no weapons, no tricks, just fists. Yes, you heard that right. Historians still argue whether this was a desperate gamble or a premeditated strategy. But either way, Heracles charges a mythological murder lion with nothing but arm strength and a bad attitude. The fight, it's not short. Outside, you wait. Hours pass. A bird flies by, hesitates, and chooses not to land. The sun begins to set, and then silence. Then a sound. Not a roar, not a scream, but something heavy being dragged. Out of the cave steps Heracles, panting, scratched, triumphant, and holding the body of the lion, dead. It's hard to tell who looks more exhausted, the hero or the beast. But Heracles isn't finished. Not yet. He studies the golden hide, runs a hand over it, and decides, this would make a great coat. The only problem? It's still indestructible. No knife can cut it. No blade can pierce it. It's like trying to stitch a steel drum with a dandelion stem. And here comes my favourite part. According to one version of the myth, Heracles solves this problem by using the lion's own claws to skin it. That's right. He gives the lion a posthumous manicure and uses it as tailoring equipment. Quirky? Absolutely. Gross? A little. Efficient? Undeniably. Soon enough, Heracles emerges fully cloaked in the lion's hide, head and all. The massive skull forms a sort of hood, the eyes empty, the golden mane draping down his back like a royal cloak. He looks terrifying, but also oddly fashionable. The hide becomes his signature look, like a hero's uniform, but fuzzy. Later art will show him in it constantly, swinging that big club, lion hood perched over his wild hair, looking like someone who misunderstood the assignment at a masquerade ball. He returns to King Eurystheus, who reportedly gets so scared at the sight that he hides in a giant pot. Yes, really, a literal amphora, big enough to store olive oil, or apparently frightened kings. And Heracles? He doesn't gloat. He just checks the first labour off the list and gets ready for the next one. But the lion's story doesn't end there. The gods, watching from above, decide this creature was too majestic, too wild, too symbolically rich to fade into the dust. So they lift it into the stars, immortalised as the constellation Leo. And you, still sitting quietly under that summer sky, glance up and see it again. The curve of the lion's back, the arc of its mane. It's still there. Not roaring, not hunting, just shining, soft and gold and eternal. The stars shimmer faintly now as you look up, trying to trace the outline of the great lion. Leo stretches from one corner of the sky to the other, its arc familiar, the hook of its tail always catching your eye just before sleep takes over. But in ancient times, before modern constellations had neat little borders or helpful stargazing apps, Leo wasn't just a shape, it was a reminder, a caution, a crown. Back then, people didn't look at the night sky for leisure. They looked up for answers. Sailors watched Leo rise in late summer, using it to navigate across the unpredictable swells of the Mediterranean. Farmers knew that when the lion appeared, it meant the hottest, driest days were coming. The Dies Canicularis, or dog days, named after Sirius, the dog star, but closely linked to Leo as well. The lion prowling the sky just before harvest wilted under the weight of the sun. Historians still argue whether ancient cultures genuinely feared Leo's appearance or simply respected its timing. Either way, its presence was deeply felt. To see Leo was to know the world was shifting into its most intense phase. But there was more to Leo than weather and wayfinding. You imagine a priestess in Babylon climbing a zigzagged staircase up to the rooftop of a ziggurat. She carries a small bronze bowl of burning resin. At the top, she squints into the star-flecked velvet, seeking the lion's back. She murmurs a prayer, not to Heracles, but to the beast, Because in some cultures, Leo wasn't the villain in a hero's tale. It was sacred, powerful, a symbol of protection and endurance. In Egypt, the lion was associated with fierce goddesses like Sekhmet, whose breath created the desert. She was destruction and healing in one. During certain festivals, people would drink beer dyed red to imitate blood and honor her power. Though, let's be honest, some probably just like the excuse to drink. And yet, even in Greek myth, the lion isn't just a brute, it's clever. It chooses its cave carefully. It avoids open conflict until forced. You start to wonder, was the lion meant to be a beast or a mirror? Because here's the strange thing. Heracles never hunted the lion. He confronted it. There's a difference. He didn't track it across forests or set traps with bait. He simply went to where it already was and entered its space. And the fight? Not glorious, not quick, just raw, stubborn endurance. The lion doesn't scream. Heracles doesn't taunt. It's less a battle and more a reckoning. You shift slightly in your seat and picture that silent, dark cave again. The scrape of stone, the slow, thunderous breathing. Two ancient creatures, one man, one myth, locked in a struggle older than gods and fresher than fear. And when it's over, the outcome isn't erasure, it's transformation. Heracles becomes the lion in a way, wears it, adopts its power, merges with the symbol he defeated, and the lion, in turn, becomes a story, not silenced, but elevated. This dynamic, opponent as identity, is not unique to Greek mythology. In many legends, the hero doesn't just conquer, they absorb. From Norse berserkers donning bearskins to African tales of warriors blessed by the spirits of the animals they best, the boundary between beast and man is often thin. It's not about destruction, it's about understanding what makes the beast worthy of remembrance. You picture Heracles again, walking into his next labour with the lion's mane brushing his back. He's changed, not humbled exactly, but tempered, like metal through flame. A fringe theory even suggests the Nemean Lion wasn't a literal creature at all, but a metaphor for the wildness within. That the first labour was symbolic. Face yourself, your rage, your fear, and if you survive, carry that truth on your shoulders. But Heracles didn't write memoirs, so we'll never know. He just kept going, from monsters to mares to rivers full of muck. Meanwhile, up above, Leo rose in the east each night, silent, golden, steady. And over time, people forgot the fight, forgot the sweat and blood. They remembered the shape, the shimmer, the way the stars curved like a sleeping cat curled up beside the moon. Centuries later, astrologers gave Leo new meaning: boldness, drama, loyalty. Hair that somehow always looks like a wind machine is nearby. People born under this sign are said to crave recognition, warmth, theatrical moments, and deep devotion. But underneath all that, the echo of a creature that once chose silence, a cave, a quiet dignity. You glance up again. Leo hasn't moved, still lying there, spine arched across the sky, paws tucked in, eyes closed, not stalking, not roaring, just being. And for a moment, you wonder, maybe that's the real legacy, not the battle, not the hide, not the hero's victory, but the reminder that even the fiercest beasts rest eventually. That power doesn't have to shout. Sometimes it just shines. Now that you've met the lion and followed it into the stars, let's rewind just a little to the moment before the myth hardened into stone, before Heracles arrived, before the beast had a name. Because the thing about myths is, they rarely start with certainty. They start with whispers, half-heard warnings, and a trail of odd footprints in the mud. Imagine it, a small village on the edge of an ancient Greek forest. The sun is beginning to dip, casting amber across low stone walls and olive groves. Children are being called in for dinner, but one boy lingers, staring at the tree line. He swears he saw something, large, golden, and moving without sound. Of course, nobody believes him, not until the sheep start vanishing, then the herdsmen, and finally, a hunter or two who thought they were invincible. The region near Nemea becomes quieter. Roads are avoided, fires are built larger, and the whispers begin. Historians still argue whether there was ever a real beast behind the myth. Perhaps it was a particularly large lion that had wandered from Africa or Asia Minor, places where lions once roamed more freely. Or maybe it was a story sewn together from fear and distance, one village adding claws, another adding impenetrable fur, and a poet eventually giving it a lair. Whatever the origin, one thing is clear. People needed the lion to mean something. Monsters, after all, aren't just plot devices. They're warnings. They're metaphors. They're the embodiment of whatever a culture fears most, dressed up in fur, fire, or fangs. In this case, the Nemean Lion might have represented the unknowable wilderness, the edge of civilization, that thin boundary where shepherds stopped singing and swords started trembling. And into that space walks Heracles, not yet a demigod of legend, just a man, well, a half-god man, sent to atone. His punishment? 12 labours. Tasks so impossible they might just knock some sense into his divine ego. Labour 1. Kill the Nemean Lion. Now, your average warrior might bring a spear or set a trap. But Heracles? He arrives with a club, wood, heavy, honest, no sharp edges, no trickery. You picture him approaching the cave, brows furrowed, cloak already dusty. He doesn't roar, he doesn't pose, he just walks. And when the lion charges, something clicks. Not fear, not aggression, but focus. The fight that follows is short on spectacle and long on struggle. Heracles tries arrows, useless. The lion's hide repels them like raindrops. He tries his sword, bends it. Finally, he throws it all aside, grabs the beast by the neck, and holds on. No cleverness, no god swooping in to help, just arms locked around a myth, and neither giving in. Eventually, the lion falls, quietly. But here's the curious part. Heracles doesn't celebrate. No victory dance, no triumphal song. He sits by the body for a while. Maybe he's tired. Maybe he's thinking about the 10, or was it 12? Labour's still ahead. Maybe he's wondering why the victory feels quiet. You shift again, the warmth of the room making your limbs feel slow and sleepy. Eventually, Heracles tries to skin the lion. It won't cut. Nothing works. Frustrated, he looks at the beast's claws, curved and gleaming. He tries those, and they work. It's a strange little detail, but a beautiful one. The only thing that can harm the lion is itself. That's something to keep in mind the next time you wrestle with your own inner beasts. So, Heracles takes the hide and wraps it around his shoulders. The head becomes a hood. The fur covers his back. And now, instead of the club-wielding wanderer, we have a new image. Heracles, the lion slayer, part man, part myth, armoured in the thing he overcame. Some versions of the story say the lion's spirit rose into the sky, placed there by Hera, who hoped the constellation would remind people that not all monsters are forgotten. Others say Zeus did it, out of fatherly pride or aesthetic impulse. Either way, Leo appears. but not as a defeated beast, as a crown, a recognition of the creature's strength, not just its demise. Fringe scholars have suggested that this moment, the lion's elevation, was a quiet rebellion against the hero narrative, that even in death, the lion retained dignity, power, presence, and that maybe, just maybe, the story isn't about Heracles at all. You can still see that echoed in how the constellation was drawn by early astronomers. Leo isn't shown with claws bared or mouth open. It's reclined, regal, watchful, like a protector, not a predator. And perhaps that's what made it worthy of the sky. You're still there, half curled on a cushion of your own thoughts, staring up at the sky where Leo rests, reclined, patient, like a memory that never quite leaves the room. And as your gaze softens, the stars begin to rearrange themselves, gently nudging us into the next chapter of this lion's long, dreamy afterlife. Because after Heracles, the myth could have ended. A hero defeats a beast, wears its hide, and moves on to his next impossible task, curtain call. But myths aren't polite. They linger, they echo, they evolve. And Leo's constellation becomes more than a celestial tombstone. It turns into a symbol. Let's drift to Babylon, a few centuries before classical Greece got its poetic hands on the sky. The Babylonians, meticulous star-charting visionaries that they were, already had a lion in the heavens. They called it Ur, G-U-L-A, literally the Great Lion, and saw it not just as a beast, but as a royal guardian, one who stood watch over kingship itself. So when the Greeks came along and began stitching their stories onto the fabric of older civilizations, they weren't painting on a blank canvas. They were layering myth upon myth, lion upon lion, meaning upon meaning. Historians still argue whether the Greek Leo is entirely original or a borrowed constellation with new branding. Some say it's a clever repackaging of earlier Mesopotamian symbols. Others argue it's a classic case of parallel symbolism. After all, lions have a way of commanding attention, no matter which desert or delta they prowl through. You imagine an ancient stargazer lying on a rooftop, reed mat beneath their back, eyes tracking a pattern of glowing embers that flicker just so. There's the shoulder, the spine, the elegant curve of the tail. A lion, bold and undeniable, stretching across the night like a bridge between what we fear and what we respect. It wasn't just the Greeks and Babylonians who gave Leo a place in the sky. The Persians too held lions in high esteem, often linking them to kingship, divine strength, and solar power. In fact, Leo's appearance in the night sky during midsummer, when the sun baked the earth dry and tempers grew short, made it a perfect emblem for fiery pride and regal stillness. Ancient Egyptians noticed this timing too. When Leo rose just before the Nile's annual flood, it marked a sacred moment of renewal, water from the sky, fertility to the fields, and at the center of it all, Leo, the lion who stood not for violence, but for balance and rebirth. It's easy to forget, in our world of apps and glowing screens, just how deeply ancient peoples lived with the stars. They weren't up there for decoration. They were maps, calendars, warning signs, bedtime stories. Leo told you when to plant, when to harvest, when to be careful with fire. And more than that, it told you something about yourself. Because sooner or later, someone decided that stars weren't just guiding fields and floods. They were shaping personalities. Enter astrology. Now, whether you check your horoscope daily or roll your eyes every time Mercury retrogrades, it's hard to deny the poetic charm of imagining that the universe left personality blueprints twinkling above us. And Leo? Oh, Leo got quite the resume. Ruled by the sun, associated with fire, symbolizing courage, creativity, and occasionally just a pinch of royal-level drama. You picture a Leo-born artisan in Alexandria, painting golden lines onto a scroll while humming loudly enough for the entire street to hear. Or a Leo farmer in ancient Thrace, planting his fields in straight, theatrical rows, because even wheat deserves flair. Of course, astrology wasn't uniform across time or region. Roman interpretations added their own spin. Medieval scholars layered in Christian metaphors. And modern horoscopes? Well, they often make Leo sound like a lion with a full-time PR agent. But at the heart of it, Leo the constellation always circles back to two things: presence and pride. And not the bad kind of pride, not arrogance or bluster, but the kind that says, I was here, I mattered, I left a little warmth behind. That's the lion you're watching now, the one who once fought Heracles, who once rose with the Nile, who still glows year after year, telling the same quiet truth. Some stories aren't about triumph or tragedy. They're about endurance. You shift slightly, blanket drawn higher. The room is still. You're breathing slow. The stars in your mind's sky hold still, and Leo lingers at the edge of sleep. It's no longer just a constellation now. It's a memory with claws tucked in, a guardian watching over the old and the quiet, a tale that doesn't roar, but still echoes. The lion remains above you, his celestial paws suspended in twilight. And though your eyes may be heavy, your thoughts still wander, softly now, through the winding halls of time, where Leo's presence isn't just seen in stars, but felt in symbols, stories, and echoes across art, architecture, and myth. Let's drift forward, past antiquity, into the murmuring corridors of the Middle Ages. You step into a manuscript scriptorium, parchment, ink, candlelight. A monk, hunched beneath a curved arch of stone and patience, carefully paints a golden line into the margin of a psalter. The lion, poised, his mane tinged with shell gold, isn't roaring. He's regal, watching, almost gentle. In this age of illuminated manuscripts and careful allegory, the lion transforms again. No longer just a beast or a constellation, he becomes a moral mirror, a symbol of Christ, of vigilance, of spiritual strength. In bestiaries, the medieval moral guides disguised as animal encyclopedias, lions are said to sleep with their eyes open, not because they're paranoid, but because they're noble, ever watchful, divinely aware. Historians still argue whether medieval monks truly believed all the animal lore they recorded, or whether they simply enjoyed the symbolism and excuses to draw elaborate beasts in the margins. Either way, the lion reigns supreme. And Leo, his constellation, it was folded into this spiritual narrative, not as Heracles' victim anymore, but as a heavenly guardian, a sign that power and nobility could be quiet, could be sacred. You take another imaginary step forward, this time to Renaissance Italy, where astrology makes a grand comeback, wearing a fancier robe and quoting Plato. Royal courts compete for astrologers. Artists weave zodiac signs into frescoes and fountains. And Leo becomes the darling of solar alignments, sun kings, and all things radiant. In Florence, lions prowl across public sculptures and civic seals. They're no longer just animals or gods. They're political statements, reminders of resilience, of city-states that refuse to be swallowed by empires. You might think of Leo as static, a fixed shape in the stars. But down here on Earth, the lion dances between meanings: protector, predator, ruler, saint. He adapts. He endures, much like you. And maybe that's why this myth still resonates, not because of the battle, brave as it was, or even the stars, bright as they are, but because Leo offers something surprisingly human in his arc: transformation. He begins as a terror in the hills, feared by all, a monster, a challenge. But even monsters, it turns out, can be remembered with gentleness. Even trials can become symbols of guidance, and even stories that begin with fear can end in peace. Let's pause for a moment at an ancient observatory. Maybe it's Baghdad, maybe it's Alexandria, maybe it's a stone circle hidden in the Scottish Highlands. The night is clear. No torches, no city lights, just you and the cosmos. A scholar traces Leo's form with a bronze-tipped stylus on a dusty star map. Another sips bitter tea and murmurs theories about its movement through the zodiac. They're not talking about Heracles or Nemea, not directly. They're talking about timing, calendars, destiny, the subtle ways Leo's rising affects tide and temperament, planting and poetry. The lion isn't a beast here. He's a clock hand in the sky. And yet, somewhere between these dry debates and whispered calculations, there's still awe. You feel it too, don't you? Not the loud awe of fireworks or revelations. The quiet kind. The kind that hums low in your chest when you realize that this same constellation, these same stars, have been looked at by warriors, philosophers, shepherds, lovers and sailors, and now by you. That's the thread Leo carries, across centuries, across empires. A creature once defeated, now exalted. Not through conquest, but through memory. Back in the warm quiet of your own space, you picture the lion once more, not snarling, not running, just still, regal, without needing attention, confident, without needing to roar. Leo doesn't demand the center, he simply is, and that perhaps is the ultimate magic. In a universe of collapsing stars and exploding myths, here's a constellation that simply endures, not loud, not dramatic, but faithful, steady, and always overhead. You blink slowly, breath syncing with the imagined rhythm of ancient stargazers' chants. Somewhere, across the fabric of time, someone else is doing the same. You linger under Leo's gaze, drifting now into a new kind of mythology, one woven not by poets or priests, but by stargazers who watch the lion rise and fall each year with meticulous care. Welcome to the astrological Leo. Less about slaying monsters, more about personality traits, birthday charts, and whether or not you cry during romantic movies. In this realm, Leo becomes a sign, a symbol, a slice of the sky that people are born under, ruled by the sun, fixed in the fire element, and associated with traits like bravery, loyalty, and a flair for the dramatic, which, to be fair, does sound like someone who once wore a lion's hide to dinner. Historians still argue whether astrology began as strict science, artful metaphor, or elaborate celestial fan fiction. But what's clear is that for thousands of years, humans have assigned meaning to the stars. Not because the stars demanded it, but because we needed it. So here's what Leo supposedly brings: warmth, confidence, a need to shine, and, if some horoscopes are to be believed, a mild intolerance for being ignored. You picture someone born under Leo lounging in a sunbeam, casually pretending not to pose, and humming a theme song no one else can hear. Maybe you've met a few Leos like that. Maybe you are one. But back to the history. In the Hellenistic world, the signs of the zodiac became codified. Think ancient scrolls, long-winded star charts, and a lot of musings about personality based on birth dates. Leo was placed firmly in the middle of summer when the sun was at its proudest and crops basked in golden light. This wasn't an accident. Ancient thinkers saw patterns in everything. Lions hunted in the heat. The sun blazed brightest. Leaders stood tall. Coincidence? Not likely. The stars, to them, were a kind of mirror, and Leo reflected a kind of cosmic leadership. You walk slowly through an ancient temple now, perhaps Dendera in Egypt, where the zodiac is carved into the ceiling. Leo's shape, curled and proud, stretches across the stone. Unlike in Western art, where constellations might be posed mid-roar, this lion looks serene, at peace, regal without chaos. It makes you think, maybe Leo isn't all bravado. Maybe beneath the solar symbolism and roaring pride is something gentler, protective, loyal, centered. After all, the lion is not constantly hunting. He rests, watches, basks, and protects his pride, not just in the ego sense, but in the literal, familial one. So too with Leo the archetype. This part of the mythology isn't about slaying or being slain. It's about shining, yes, but also about staying, about being a constant light when others flicker, a hearth, a home base, the dependable sun that rises, even on cloudy days. You pause now in your stargazing. The sky is darker than before, but Leo is still there, still watching, still composed. Outside of astrology, Leo found new life in art, medieval coats of arms, Renaissance frescoes, Victorian wallpaper. The lion walked from mythology into culture like he belonged there, and maybe he did. Even now, he prowls through literature and films. Always the same outline, brave, a little vain, surprisingly nurturing. Think Aslan from Narnia, or the Lion King's Mufasa. Figures who combine strength with stillness, roars with wisdom, a crown that doesn't need polishing. There's a fringe theory, barely whispered among classical scholars, that Leo's resilience across centuries is less about his physical form and more about the need he fulfills. That every age has required a figure of strength who doesn't conquer by force, but by presence. You tilt your head, imagining Leo's constellation overhead, not just as a pattern of stars, but as a map of meaning, a story that refuses to fade, a reminder that some myths aren't loud or complicated, they're simply steady. And maybe that's why Leo survives, not just as a beast, not just as a sign, but as an idea. That dignity can be quiet, that strength can be warm, that even when battles fade and heroes rest, the stars remain. And among them, a lion who watches, glows, and waits for the next dreamer to look up and see themselves. The night deepens, the stars blur at the edges, but Leo stays sharp, grounding you, guiding you, and with that, you feel your breath slow. Not because the story's over, but because it has found its rhythm. Like Leo himself, gentle, glowing, and patient. And now you find yourself walking alongside ancient rivers. Real ones this time. Not rivers of stars or myth, but of history and ink. Because even a lion made of starlight can leave a paw print on parchment. As the Roman Empire swept across lands and calendars, it brought with it new ways to name time. The Julian calendar, the solar year, month names dedicated to emperors. And yet, tucked quietly into these months, you'd still find the stars whispering from the margins. Leo, the lion of midsummer. In Roman horoscopes, Leo governed from late July to mid-August, those hot, heavy days when everything slowed and the fields stood golden with grain. And because the Romans were, well, Romans, they couldn't resist assigning the lion to rule over glory, honour, and maybe a bit of theatre. But there's something even more curious. The ancient Egyptian calendar aligned Leo with the flooding of the Nile, a life-giving surge of water that signaled rebirth and nourishment. Coincidence? Historians still argue whether this connection to Leo was intentional or just poetic chance. Either way, it's hard to ignore the symbolism. The lion comes with both fire and renewal, heat and harvest. You drift through a Roman mosaic now, beneath your bare feet. It's sun-warmed and worn smooth by centuries. At its center, a lion. Its mane is stylized in spirals, its eyes clever and calm. Surrounding it, seasonal symbols, sheaves of wheat, coiled serpents, a sun disk. You recognize the layout, the zodiac, encircling time. Even in Roman bathhouses, Leo made appearances, etched into walls, carved into fountainheads. Perhaps the idea was that by honoring the lion, the bather absorbed a little of its bravery. Or maybe Romans just liked to be reminded that even while soaking, they were part of the cosmos. Later, in medieval Europe, Leo's symbolism shifted again. He became less beast, more emblem. On banners, on shields, on family crests. The lion now roared for kings and crusaders, for noble houses trying to say, "Yes, I can lead. Please ignore the tax policies." But beneath the politics, Leo still carried the myth. The echo of Hercules, the star map from Mesopotamia, the warmth of a hearth, and the rhythm of breath under a hot August moon. You find yourself seated now in a scriptorium, a dim room lined with parchment and ink. A monk hunched nearby, carefully adds colour to the lion in his manuscript. The mane is painted with saffron, the claws in silver, the tail curling like a ribbon. Gold leaf sparkles along the edges. Here, Leo isn't wild. He's sacred. He watches over chapters of time. He keeps history honest. And yet, Leo never roared his way into dominance. He didn't need to. Much like Hestia, whom we visited in another story, Leo persisted not through noise, but through presence. That's the thing about myths. They aren't fossilized. They're migratory. They shift and shimmer, wrapping themselves in whatever culture needs them most. One century's constellation becomes the next century's royal crest. One generation's monster becomes another's symbol of pride. And through it all, Leo never fades. Even in today's star charts, astrology apps, and memes about Mercury retrograde, Leo stands firm, still ruled by the sun, still described as magnetic, proud, theatrical, loyal. You think about the friend who throws birthday parties with themed playlists and colour-coded balloons. The aunt who tells stories at dinner with voices and hand gestures. The kid who insists on wearing a crown to school because it's Tuesday. Maybe they carry a little bit of Leo's spark. Of course, the skeptics will roll their eyes. It's just stars, they say. It's just storytelling. And they're not wrong. But you felt it, haven't you? That pull when you gaze at the sky. That quiet sense that something up there remembers you. It's not about believing in fate or magical destinies. It's about connection. It's about knowing that people long before us saw that same line in the sky and whispered to it, named it, needed it, and now you too carry the tale. The story of a lion who became a star, then a symbol, then a companion to dreamers. The sky hasn't changed, but you have. And maybe that's enough to keep the myth alive. You're lying on your back now, beneath a canopy of ink blue sky, dotted with stars so clear they seem to hum. Above you, Leo stretches across the heavens. You can trace the arc of his spine, the curl of his tail, the shine of his heart, Regulus, the little king, one of the brightest stars in the night, in the very center of the lion's chest. Even now, it pulses with soft silver light, steady as a heartbeat. Regulus has been known by many names. In ancient Babylon, it was Sharu, the king. In Persia, it marked the royal watch, one of 4 guardian stars of the sky. And even now, astronomers still measure time and tilt and trajectory by its placement. Some scholars argue whether Regulus was ever meant to represent Leo at all, whether the lion formed around the star, or the other way around. But does it matter? Myths don't always begin with clarity. They begin with need. A need to explain the quiet power of summer heat, the bravery we wish we had, the gentle pride of knowing who you are without needing to prove it. You watch as a breeze lifts the grass nearby. The sound is soft, like the turning of a heavy page. The air smells faintly of rosemary and wood smoke, imaginary perhaps, or carried from some far-off past. You think about the lion again, not the snarling beast from gladiator pits or frescoes, but the steady one, the quiet strength in the myth, the protector of hearth and story, the one who fought and, in the end, was honoured not with spoils or song, but with stars. And here's a curious thing. Leo, in modern sky maps, is made up of more than 70 stars, some of them massive, some barely visible to the eye. They're not physically near each other in space. They only appear that way from Earth, an illusion of alignment, kind of like people. You don't have to roar to matter. You don't need to shine alone to be part of something greater. You're one of the stars in the constellation, part of the myth, part of the pattern, part of what helps others find their way. That's how Leo lives on, not in roars or claws, but in constellations and connection. In the way the human brain looks up and sees stories among the stars. In the way the human heart finds comfort in patterns that repeat season after season. Even when the world is loud or lonely, or spinning faster than you'd like, it's still there, the lion in the sky, watching quietly, keeping time. You sit up a little and stretch. Your shoulders feel loose now, your thoughts softer at the edges. You realise you've walked through the entire life of myth, from golden-maned hero to celestial symbol, from roaring monster to sleepy guardian of August evenings, from blood and bravery to bedtime story. And now, the night leans in closer, tender and wide. You feel yourself folding into that hush, that pause between one breath and the next. Stars don't sleep, but you do. And tonight, Leo keeps watch.